Hey y'all, how y'all doing? This is Mongo Slade, and today we're going to talk about whether NXT exists actually to compete with AEW or not. My answer is no. But first, hit the like button for me. Also, hit subscribe unless you're already subscribed, in which case, thank you for still being subscribed. So, one of the running talks here on the internet is that NXT exists as an entity on USA Network only because AEW Dynamite was being brought up from Tony Khan and Turner over at TNT. It seems to be a pretty well received, well believed concept. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? NXT was brought up basically just a couple of weeks before AEW debuted. Okay, that was fine. Except the fact that NXT actually exists long before AEW was a thing. Even having aired an episode of NXT on USA Network already. But of course, none of that matters. People tend to believe that NXT exists only to compete with AEW. Which, again, if you look at it, if you are basically a linear thinker, it will make perfect sense, But then you have to ask yourself a couple of questions. One, why wouldn't they send any star power to NXT? You have all of these people who are willing to go back. Andrade, Aleister Black, hell, Sasha Banks and Bayley were willing to go back. Kevin Owens was willing to go back. There's been a number of people willing to go back to NXT, and WWE won't do it. In fact, they keep doing the opposite. Keith Lee became a star on NXT. They took him out of there. Rhea Ripley, she was a star on NXT. They took her off TV. They took her, and basically she was appearing on Raw and SmackDown and stuff like that. And that's one thing. Another thing, they didn't add anything to NXT except for a second hour. So they didn't take them to go traveling. There's no pyro. They're still in the same studio they've always been in. Shot the exact same way it's always been shot. So they really didn't add anything to NXT except for a second hour. They still take their talent because they took Matt Riddle, they took Keith Lee, they took any number of other people. They're not sending anybody back. They sent Finn Balor back and they sent Ember Moon back, but that was about it. They're not sending anybody. They're not sending them any star power. They keep taking all the star power that they do make. They keep taking them. So why is NXT on the show? Obviously, they're not there to compete with AEW. Because if you were competing with AEW, you would put money into the production, wouldn't you? You would have pyro. It would be better lit. You probably would have bigger stars on the show. You would have more talent on the show. You wouldn't put certain people who are on the show. I mean, come on. Look at some of the people that they put on NXT. They're obviously not TV ready, right? So why would you do that? Well, the answer is actually a little bit more simple if you look into it. What happened also before AEW came up and before NXT was joined USA? SmackDown went to Fox. So SmackDown, which was airing on USA Network, lost SmackDown, but they got NXT. So that seems to make more sense that they basically just said, oh, our good friends at USA, you guys have got screwed because Fox wanted to give us $1 billion for SmackDown. I mean, we got to take the $1 billion deal, but we'll give you guys Raw, and you'll get NXT. And NXT still runs exactly the same way it's always been run. The occasional commercial on Raw, and that's about it. I mean, they did have the one NXT run where they had the NXT versus Raw versus SmackDown for Survivor Series, which people, of course, blew out of proportion. They were like, oh, they're just trying to compete with AEW. They're going to have a lot of crossovers. It's like, yeah, there was some. It wasn't a lot. But they already been doing that. They were doing that in years before that. They had done NXT invasions of Raw and SmackDown even before 2019. It seemed like people just like the idea of AEW and WWE competing. They like it so much that they're even starting to talk about, the 18 to 34 demographics. I keep telling people that doesn't make sense because WWE is a PG program. They're not aiming at the same audience that AEW, and people seem to think so. But it's like, WWE has been incredibly upfront with a lot of the things that they're doing. If you are paying attention, you get a pretty clear picture that they're not really trying to compete with AEW. Hell, if they were trying to compete with AEW, for starters, NXT is the third brand / training session. I like to call it like the NCAA, where it's like some people who are ready for the big leagues and certain people are not. They have to make their own stars. They don't get any help from Raw or SmackDown. So you're in a position where you're the little engine that could of the WWE. And people are like, oh yeah, well, they just exist to compete with AEW. And it's like, no. I think they exist to placate USA Network for losing SmackDown. And that's it. USA Network lost SmackDown, and WWE gave them NXT. That's really what happened. Anything else doesn't seem to make sense if you look at how WWE treats NXT, how they use NXT, how they continue to take large groups of numbers of people out of NXT at one time. They take literally 3-4 people out of NXT at one time without putting anybody back. They'll put back one person every 6 months after they've taken 10 people out of NXT. I mean, they took Chelsea Green and Vanessa Bourne out of NXT just to do nothing with them for months. They took Ricochet to do nothing. They literally would take people out of NXT just to send them home. That doesn't sound like you're trying to build a third brand. It doesn't sound like you're trying to compete with AEW. I mean, AEW is throwing everything. They're throwing bunkhouse matches, Jericho on commentary. They're doing big budget skits. They're doing everything to try to win. WWE is doing what? They occasionally spend some money on NXT, like they spent some money for the Halloween Havoc show. And they probably spent a little bit of money for the Great American Bash show, but that's about it. When they had Sasha Banks wrestle, that's about it. They don't spend a lot of money on NXT. NXT is supposed to be low budget, primarily a wrestling show, even though it's gotten a little bit too silly for my taste, especially with this Cameron Grimes stuff. Doesn't seem to me like WWE is really trying to use NXT to compete with AEW. And I want to know why people are so obsessed with thinking about that they're not really looking at the big picture. The big picture is that WWE has these partnerships with companies like NBC. NBC owns USA Network. It makes perfect sense to me that they have this corporate partnership with NBC where NBC still gets packages of WWE material for their Peacock streaming device. They even show those commercials. I don't know if they're still showing like old Raws or something like that on Peacock, but you know, they have tons of material with NBC. NBC and Fox are competitors. Okay? NBC and Fox are competitors. WWE is trying to do business with both of them. It would make sense if they were going to lose SmackDown to try to placate them somehow by giving them NXT. That makes sense to me. So I don't even look at NXT and AEW as competitors. They're just on at the same time. Okay? But WWE does not put the same amount of effort, the same amount of money into NXT as Tony Khan and TNT are putting into AEW. And it shows. It absolutely shows. There's not the same star power. They're not even attempting to make the same star power because NXT could lose 3 or 4 people tomorrow. Just at a snap of a finger, Damian Priest and a bunch of other people just end up gone. You know, that's just kind of how it goes. So for me, I don't look at AEW and NXT as competitors. I look at NXT as a silver medal to USA Network because they lost SmackDown. That's how I look at it. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel, and I'll talk to you guys later.